Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Civil Clarity Reports. I'm one of your three hosts, John Noel, along with Marty Espinosa and Jody Kirk. And tonight we are going to be discussing artificial intelligence, the benefits, the risk. Is it really a threat to humanity, or is it something that humanity should embrace as we move forward in life? Now, Marty, one of the things that I wanted to discuss and throw out to you about this particular topic. I definitely have questions for both you and Jody. But one of the things that I want to tie this into is the belief that if we do go down the road and embrace artificial intelligence more and more and more, there has been some discussion that as artificial intelligence becomes more embraced in our everyday lives, that the idea of God and faith and family and reproduction seems to be getting pushed and pushed away as we go down the road of AI a little bit more. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a lot. I think that it's positioned itself right now to be in the perfect spot because God is being run out of our lives. You can see it all over. You can see the way people live, how they act, the things that they do. Kind of coincide with what you just said about, is it a threat God-wise? It is, because we have been positioned since Trump took office. That's when it really started. Been positioned, put in the position where we are being told that all we need is ourselves to survive. And people actually are starting to believe that. Most people are living for themselves now. My wife and I were talking about that earlier, how many people are going to be alone when they're older, in their old age, because it will be no longer important. It won't be important any longer for their children to be involved with them, because their children have their own lives and their own thing that they're doing. So you've heard that, and you know this for a fact, John, that there is something to be said about taking care of your parents in their old age. You know something about that for sure. So that's going to stop. And I think AI is I don't consider it like a threat to the complete future, but I think it is a threat. But I don't think it'll ever come to awareness of its own. I think that's can't happen. I do think, though, that it will replace many things, including God. And what was the rest of your question? You gave me a whole bunch there.
That was the biggest one, really, is the fact that, if you embrace the fact that artificial intelligence can do everything that man can do, and it can just be programmed, and there have definitely been some studies. There's about how the fact that with the rise of technology in general, in particular AI, in other words, if you elevate man to the status of God, then it continuously removes God from society.
That's exactly right. That's part of a plan, and I don't know if it's a plan of man or a combination of plan and the evil one. I'm not sure. But I do know for a fact that we are in a battle for good and evil right now, of good and evil. And that could be positioned into the future. I do think that part of that will be to help reduce population. I think that we have to factor that in because of what's going on now with all the things that they're trying to do, like in poor countries and with in Africa, especially South America. So I think once you remove, and I've said this many times, remove God from the family, you can do pretty much what you want to do with the people.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Jody, I think artificial intelligence, when you look at so many different aspects with not just work, but when you look at it with tie into the, what the so-called nuclear family, which is being demonized as a negative now, even racist to some people.
Right.
It does factor in. It does seem. Not only does it seem is it a threat to what I would say is an overall belief in something beyond yourself, but it's replaced relationships. 40% of young adults, millennials, are depressed. They don't have any human connections, and you can even see some of these statistics coming to the surface before COVID. So a lot of people, if you tie in loneliness, if you tie in depression, if you tie in lack of faith, they'll kind of tie it in and say, well, that's COVID. That was the result of lockdowns. That'll change. But you were seeing that trend, that trajectory before COVID occurred with young people and the impact of being always connected to devices, no personal relationships. It's too much work to have a real relationship. So there's no way I think you can separate the fact of this addiction to technology that, and it's kind of even going beyond millennials now, right, into baby boomers and Gen Xers, but nonetheless, to ignore the fact that the reliance on AI to just take care of everyday needs and beliefs, I think that's a real threat. Not only that, but it is a threat the uh, to the employment pool. I mean, to employment as well.
When it comes to AI, like I told you guys earlier, I went to school for 5 years through the National Radio Institute to become a computer hardware technician. And the movie Terminator came out right about the time I completed that course. My stepfather asked me, he says, do you think it would ever be able to do that? And at the time I told him, no, no way. Because back then I had the knowledge that you could take a nice powerful magnet, you could go up against any hard drive or any chip, you turn that magnet on and it would wipe all the information on that chip. Since that time, our technology has developed in such a way as that no longer works. You no longer have that as a foolproof plan. You can't just wipe the information off the chips anymore. Um, Recently, Ted Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber, um, back in the 70s had a manifesto, and he went around and he did 17 bombings, and he took out a number of people, and he targeted industry, places like Intel, Digital, Compact. These were all technology plants, and he was a professor. He was a professor of mathematics before he started doing this at Harvard University. And his brother caught on to him and caught on to the fact that it was him and ratted him out. So they caught up with him. He went to prison. Well, about 3 months ago, AI came online for Google. And in his manifesto, he stated that technology was going to be the doom of mankind because it would replace everything we do. It would end up controlling everything we do. It would drive everything we do to the point that we would eventually exterminate ourselves by using technology. And like I said, Google came out with its AI and released it about 3 months ago. And Ted Kaczynski, from the way I understand it from the rumor online, is he wrote a little letter and he committed suicide because he had found out that AI had been released upon the world. And he stated that the Antichrist had risen and he wasn't sticking around for it. I'm not so sure he's wrong. They're trying to tie AI right now into everything financial. All of this ESG, all of the banking institutions, they're trying to tie it into just about everything. Your medical, your dental, your everything we do. They're trying to institute AI into it. It's going to be replacing jobs. It's going to be replacing a lot of jobs, including these press reporters. Um, and part of the biblical text that you run across in the prophecies of John is that everybody will bear the mark of the beast, that we will not be able to get food or water or purchase things or cover our bills or any of that stuff without this mark. So, being a non Catholic, not necessarily a Christian, and I don't follow any given religion, I look at what I'm seeing right now and I consider artificial intelligence probably to be the worst threat against humanity that has ever come up. Because I believe eventually it will take over to the point that it may not have to be a central being like you had with Terminator, where it's controlling all of the other machines. But you will have artificial intelligence covering our social security, and it will tell us what we're going to do. You'll have it covering your health care. It'll be telling you what to do. You'll have it doing your banking and determining whether or not you should be allowed to spend your money. Um, and it will do it based on what they're trying to put in there with this ESG, which is environmental social government. So it says if we do any damage to the planet, well, they can fine us for that and charge a carbon tax. Like I said, I personally consider it the worst threat we're facing out of all of the threats that we have gone through in the past 20 years, from 9/11, before 9/11. I didn't actually believe that they could ever get to that point technologically, but we are now at that point technologically. I watched a show on Netflix here about a week ago, and it's called The Rise of the Killer Robots. Um, and is what it does is it covers what we have done over the past 20 years with androids and robots and drones. Recently, about 5 years ago, we actually had a drone that had artificial intelligence on it that came out of France, and it went and targeted somebody in the Middle East, and it made the decision to take out the target. We didn't take that decision. No human touched it and said, you don't do that. Okay. It made its own decision to take out the target. Okay. That's a problem. Right now, we have drones and we have robots that are fully automated that you can mount machine guns on. You can mount grenade launchers on. We've got drones that come in with little machine guns on them that they're showing on this show. It's got cameras. They've got them going into buildings and hovering around through there to determine where the bad guys are. Okay, that's the good side of the technology. But what do we do when the government takes hold of that technology and decides to use it against us? And they decide they're going to turn that technology against all of us. Right now, I'm looking at changing banks because Bank of the West sold out to a company called BMO, which is a Canadian banking company. Here's the problem I have with that. During the lockdowns, when the protesters went up there in their trucks and they decided to do their barricade, BMO and four other banks, by Justin Trudeau's order, sealed all of their bank accounts and refused to allow them access. Well, what are we going to do when the computer decides to start doing this? It decides that you're somehow a threat, so it's going to silence you. So, to me, I believe right now that is probably the greatest threat we face in humanity.
Well, and to play devil's advocate here too, this is one of the things that from the Industrial Revolution on, probably even before that, anytime that technology comes around, there does seem to be a doom and gloom scenario. And again, this is what a lot of advocates for moving into a world with more AI would probably argue. But this is definitely, this is definitely a lot different than that is. I think the threat that we're facing, the idea of automation, the idea of look, at the end of the day, I've always seen artificial intelligence as something that should be used as a tool, as something as support, but it should never be used as something as replacement. And that's what it seems to be doing. Really, it seems to be moving. And I'll tell you something. It does go to what Klaus Schwab, these guys, the World Economic Forum have been preaching that You will own nothing. You will be happy. I personally know people, and it blows my mind, that will sit there and tell me about. I find this really, really hilarious. And these are what you would say are very progressive people, right? They think they are in their head. But I had one particular individual that he's a big advocate of AI. His reasoning is because it will lead to universal basic income. In other words, wealth, right, will just kind of shoot into a certain group of people. They will have to, it'll be their obligation to take care of the rest of us. So, well, he's advocating for it. And his argument is because this is a good thing, because then people, oh, well then, and this is what you see with a lot of these fanatics in the climate change movement, right? You see it with, people that believe that, we're still this hugely racist country, even though we've had, 60, 70 years of legislation and policies passed to show otherwise. But his argument is the fact that, oh, well, you'll be able to paint, you'll be able to just hang out and do whatever you want, right? In other words, he's saying, this is what blows my mind. He's saying nobody really wants to work.
Yeah.
They just want to do what they want to do and have their basic needs met. I found that as arrogant as you can possibly get from some, because we're talking about, you and I, Jody, we support people with disabilities. I've always argued automation. I never use self checkouts personally. Honestly, I never use Amazon either. I don't begrudge anybody for using those things. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this is part of capitalism, right? You create something, and my problem has always been the fact that the ones whining the most about the wealth gap are the ones that are definitely using technology and the tools that are more convenient for them. They won't wait in line for groceries. They'll order
But
online. They'll
but
order
he's
online.
right about a couple of those things. He's waiting to be taken care of. Nobody actually wants to work. We do it because we have families to support and we have responsibilities that we will accept upon ourselves. That this is my responsibility and I need to take care of my family and I need to take care of my community. That's why we work. If we didn't have to work and we had somebody spoon feeding us all day, we'd all be sitting in a lounge chair watching TV all day, turning into bubbleheads. But
I've got some thoughts on that. I
but
was at I was at Walmart Supercenter a couple of days ago, about 3 days ago, and I always go to the manned checkout part of the store,
mhm,
which now at this one has only four, and only two of them are operating. The rest are
mhm.
self-service. Okay, so we went out to the checker. The checker's doing like one thing at a time, very slowly, right? Very slowly. It took us quite a bit of time to go through that line. There was nobody behind us, and that checker was just real slow. And I've noticed that phenomenon many times when I go to Walmart. So we went to another store day after that called Crest, and that checkout guy, he was just bam, 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 bam. So when I went outside, I told my wife, I said, I know what's happening here. The people, the checkers at the cashiers at Walmart have been told to slow it down because they are going to be the very first ones to bring in all of these automatic checkout uh, uh, devices that they're going to use when you're checking out that can check any card, can do anything. They'll just have one person manning the line, and that'll be the only employee that they'll be using. No more cashiers. They'll bring in those
in,
people to
in,
help
in
the
Albuquerque,
system through.
Marty, they're actually closing down our checkout counters for self checkout. And here's why. They put them in because they had too much theft and it was too much of a hassle to pay these employees to check all of us out. And they had lines that were just too long. So they put in self checkouts thinking this would expedite things. They'd have people at the end of the counter to make sure nobody's ripping anything off, la, la, la. Yeah, well, their theft rate went through the roof. because these people go over there and they scan one soda pop, but they forget to scan the case that's in the bottom of their cart. Okay. So they get to the door and the guy reads it and he sees Coca Cola and he looks over and sees Coca Cola and hands them back their receipt and out the door they went with the case that they didn't pay for. But yeah, so our Walmarts are actually starting to shut down the self checkouts and returning to opening full lines.
Well, here they're closing down the checkout lines that are manned. And I guess my point is this, that money is going to rule the day with AI.
They're trying to turn it
There's
into
a profit
digital.
to be made, they're going to use it. And they don't care who gets eliminated from the job.
Right.
And my second point on all of this is that if you turn AI loose on human beings, they're going to screw it up. That's all there is to it. They're going to screw it up. They're going to mess up the world for everybody.
Well, they just got talking about Los Angeles was trying to institute these drone robot dogs that they were going to use for the police department down there. And the people stood up and pushed back against it, so they decided it was probably not a good idea at this time. These dogs are coming from military surplus that we used over in Afghanistan. And they showed some of them on this TV show I watched, and they're actually mounting these little mini Gatling guns on their backs, and they go marching up through there, and they got cameras on them. You identify your target, and you tell it to fire, and it fires on the target. Okay, um, and I agree with your guy. Basically, this is going to make us all make the same amount of money. We're all going to be poor. Okay, because if ain't nobody working, and you're expecting a robot to take care of your butt, who's taking care of the robot? Okay, nobody's taking
I'm not,
care of
I'm
that.
not, yeah, I'm not surprised. I got to be honest with you. I guess the thing is that again, because one of the pushbacks that I think a lot of people can expect is that if you do criticize artificial intelligence, if you're a capitalist, that's going to be used against you. Because then, of course, progressives will argue, well, isn't that capitalism? They do have a point, right? At the end of the day, I've always said, though, you still have control over your money. Yeah, then nobody can tell you how to spend your money. You can go shopping where you want to go shop. You can buy local. Look, I see buy local stickers everywhere. I wonder how many of those people are actually really buying local. So my surprise isn't so much that there would be this criticism if you say that you think artificial intelligence is too much. I would expect that. Yeah, my surprise has always been from the progressives that argue about wealth gaps, that make an argument about corporations in general and who's got more. Well, they're clearly giving their money to corporations that are going to benefit the most. So it's one of the most hypocritical stances I've ever seen in my life. I mean, you saw that with Occupy Wall Street. You saw people out there protesting wealth, saying we are the 1%, and yet these, so-called 99% are out there, using their iPhones. They're getting Starbucks. They're shopping at big box stores to get, Amazon and all this other stuff. And it's just, I find it fascinating. It's that the progressive stance on this would be to push to say that, oh, we should do it. And if you don't believe in it, you're against capitalism. But then the same ones that argue about who's got the most money.
Well, see, I don't see you having control over your own money if it's sitting in a
You
bank.
do.
Um,
Well,
and
you still have control of it.
the perfect example of that was the protest up in Ontario and Quebec,
Yep.
where they had the banks freeze their accounts.
Yep.
If it's their
Right.
money, then how come they can't get their hands on it? They can't even use
Well,
their credit card. See, and
that,
if you
that's,
got
that's the
artificial
point.
intelligence dictating what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, where you're allowed to go and what you're allowed, the whole bit, and you don't do it, it gets to freeze your bank account. Because, like I said, they're trying to institute this into our banking systems at this
Yeah,
point.
but you can choose. You can choose where you shop. You can choose what you buy. You can choose where you have more. All right, yeah. Look, that's been the case. Money in banks for God knows how long. That probably I could even imagine what that looked like during the in the late 1920s and 30s with the stock market crash, which I'm sure, and even in 2008, right? 2007, 2008. But with that being said, you still have control of where you want to spend your money and what you want to spend your money on.
We do here. They don't in China.
They don't. Well, yeah, exactly.
And the
Right.
banking institute is trying to do the same thing with ESG here that they did in China, to where if you don't do what they tell you to do, they freeze your bank, and you don't get to buy anything until you've paid your bill and brought your social equity up. See, so that's a control factor. They're trying to institute this in our banking systems, and our banking systems are instituting artificial intelligence to service that.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. No, I
so
agree.
you've got artificial intelligence telling you how much money you have and where you're allowed to spend it, and how much you're allowed to spend.
There you are. Yeah.
Well,
So
if
yeah,
we,
I
we
can
don't
say
have controls over it, we're done because the politicians will step in next, and they'll have their little power grab there. The people with money will grab it, and the middle class is almost gone already. So it'll be the upper class against the lower class all the time, and the lower class always loses.
yeah.
So I think AI can be a threat that way, but man always screws everything up.
Everything we build has a
We're gonna mess it
benefit
up.
or a consequence to it. I mean, you've got the same thing with the A bomb. Um, the atomic energy that comes out of it ended up being a good thing. The bomb itself is a bad thing. These robots that they're building, in some ways, they can be used for good or they can be used for bad. So you've got the same problem with artificial intelligence. Right now, we're living in a society where you've got a bunch of fanatics that are instituting artificial intelligence without instituting Asimov's rules for robots, which says you cannot kill a human. You cannot act on your own. You must get authorization from a human being before you act. Those rules were set down back in the 1950s to address this issue. None of them are using that at all. They're just letting them go free reign. They've already proven that Google's IA will lie. It will make things up. It will write stories that never actually happened or ever existed. They did one here. It was about 3 weeks ago on CBS, covering artificial intelligence, and they tested Google's AI, and they asked it to point out some kind of research on whatever it was. It was something to do with like January 6th or some garbage. And all of a sudden, it pops up with 5 news articles claiming that these news articles explain all of this. And they went and researched it, and none of the news articles had ever been written by a news company. It made them up. It created them out of thin air. Okay, and
But
it did it
isn't
within
it true
seconds.
though that those things that all that has to be programmed by somebody?
No,
It can't program itself.
yeah,
You
can
can Somebody
can.
has to program it to be able to get it to react to certain things, but you can't. I don't think you can
That's
build that
that,
into a
that's
robot.
that's what they call
I don't think so.
self-learning, and they do have self-learning artificial intelligence.
Well, up to a point, I think, because their program will end at some point because they can't be all knowing. They're not God. So
Once
how can they be all knowing?
once
It
you
doesn't
release
make
once you
sense to
release it
me.
on the internet, what's going to hold it back? It's got all
What's
the
that?
space. I said, what's going to hold it back? It's got all the space on Earth to expand.
Well, another episode of Civil Clarity, gentlemen. I think we had some good discussion here tonight. We want to thank everybody out there for joining us. We are here every Thursday, and we do hope you join us next week for another episode of Civil Clarity Reports. Until then, good night.
Good night, everybody.